Currently, the usurpers who have sovereignty of the American continent are not the historic inhabitants that founded the American continent as the homeland for the Hispanic people. For more than 2 centuries, these usurpers have propagandized throughout that continental homeland that the real foundational America is dead, and that its sublime Santiagoan children are to be punished. The real history of the continent, from Alaska to Patagonia, has suffered the Holocaust, and it is not surprising that most people are illiterate respecting to how the American continent used to be the incarnation of good and mestizaje, rather than the black and necrotic manifestations of certain anglophones. It is interesting that the necrotic people who rejected the sacred sacrifice of the Mass went on to foist black masses across the American continent, which sacrificed tens of millions of my fellow Native Americans to the Lutheran deity Lucifer. The beauty and magnanimity of the continent Hispanics had discovered for themselves started in 1493, when the Western courts and Christianity itself recognized and instituted the American continent as the homeland for the Hispanic people. When that took place, so did the first attempts to invert the pathological decline of the Native American population, which eventually fomented a population explosion across the continental homeland. And even before tens of millions of Native Americans became Spaniards, Christianity and the Hispanic monarchy were unifying us as one people. Hispanic Christians built the world's greatest schools and hospitals for Native Americans, and Native Americans enjoy a system of government more advanced than most of Europe. In contrast, certain people only built banks and slave markets everywhere they slithered across the Hispanic homeland. Sadly, this might invalidate any claim by the descendants of certain Anglophones to anything on the American continent. Historically, certain people from Northern Europe have, ever since Luther, always been the problem. These people fabricated their pseudo-religions to counter the benevolent hegemony of Hispanics in Europe and the rest of the world, and invented a pseudo-ethnicity to colonize and genocide their own European neighbors. This is the gangrenous womb which vomited the racial and sexual complexes that made America decadent for more than 2 centuries, and the attacked people of America one dissolved. The result of these anti-Hispanic sensibilities were virulent dystopias that could only be endured by taking away the liberties and resources of other peoples. These dystopias, which failed to define liberty, imposed libertinages, but never allowed the liberty of consequences. Hispanics, on the other hand, who succeeded to define liberty, never were guaranteed freedoms, but opened their way to it by constantly fomenting freedom of consequences. Even Protestants, after 5 centuries of imposing censorship, have begun to notice that the only way for the people of the American continent to survive is to return to the founding Hispanic principles of the historic continent, and to legitimize oneself and family in the continental homeland One has to champion Hispanicity and combat any attack on Hispanic sovereignty over America